name is Legal, and this is the Enlightened Buzz. My name is Legal, and this is the Enlightened Buzz. And I am so excited about today's episode because we are just going to dive right in and start talking about some of the education around cannabis. More specifically, what is the difference in marijuana and hemp? And what is the difference in Delta 8 and Delta 9? And what is legal and why? And just some of those basics that I did not feel was ever really available to me in one location in terms of my understanding. And frankly, I just kept getting a lot of different versions of, I guess, the same thing. And as I was trying to learn more about just simply THC and CBD and Delta 8 and Delta 9 and gummies versus whatevers, I got in my car and I literally just went to a couple of different stores and I walked in and I just asked the people behind the counter for more information. And I felt like I got a lot of very different answers. And some of the answers almost assumed that I already knew this information. And it was kind of a bit of a chicken egg situation because I would say, what do I need? And they'd say, well, what do you want to feel? And I'd say, well, what are my options? And it just kind of perpetuated into not always getting the answer, walking out with some products that I was like, oh God, I hope this isn't scary. And frankly, I brought them home and I didn't even try them right away because I was like legit scared. And so I just kind of kept them right there in their package and just kind of, finally said, okay, today's the day, I'm going to do it. And so I don't know. I just don't think it needs to be so scary. We can discuss ways to, I guess, tiptoe into the water of all of these things. But hopefully after this episode, you'll at least feel more comfortable in knowing what is out there. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to first start at just talking about cannabis and what is it and how does it vary, etc. And I must apologize because I talk with my hands by nature, and especially when I'm talking about this subject. And I think my little hand, I don't know if they're little, but my hands are the visual aids for like plants. So there you go. So we're going to start with cannabis, and that is the term that is the species of plant. And under the umbrella of cannabis, you have two different plants. You have a marijuana plant and you have a hemp plant. So I don't know about you, but I know when I was first learning, I didn't know they were two different plants. And they're both considered cannabis. However, they have different attributes that make them unique. However, they're still similar in nature. So I often make the comparison of like clementines versus tangerines. So we acknowledge that they're both citrus and they're both mandarins and they're different fruits. However, they're so similar in nature that we often kind of get them confused and almost associate them together. However, they are distinctly different. So in just a moment, we're going to discuss the differences in these plants and understand a little bit about what makes them unique. However, before doing that, or in order to do that, I need to tell you about a cannabinoid. So it's also, I've heard it pronounced cannabinoid. So you can say cannabinoid or cannabinoid. I've heard both of them in conversation, so don't be intimidated by that word. By definition, cannabinoids are several structural classes of compounds found in the cannabis plant primarily, and most animal organisms or as a synthetic compound. So basically what that is it's a structural system inside each of these plants. There are over 100 of these cannabinoids inside each of these plants. So each cannabinoid basically has a different function and a different reason for being there. And as you might have heard from the definition, we have our own endocannabinoid system, which is just so cool and fascinating. But that is for another episode because I don't want to overcomplicate things today. So I'm getting excited that we're talking about this. I hope you're excited too. So now that you know about the cannabinoid system, we can talk more specifically about some of the cannabinoids. Like I mentioned, there's over 100 per each of those plants. So there's no way we're going to get into all of that. However, the really cool thing is that you already know some of them, and you might not even realize it. The two most well-known cannabinoids that are used in conversation in society and a lot of functional products you see on the market are CBD and THC. So you already know two of the most popular cannabinoids that are inside these plants. And they're in both of the plants. So your hemp plant and your marijuana plant each have their own system of 100 plus cannabinoids. And within each of those plants, you have THC and CBD, in addition to some other popular ones like CBG and CBN, and the list goes on. Here's the big difference though. The hemp plant produces more CBD and less THC, and the marijuana plant produces more THC and less CBD. So they both have the same compounds and cannabinoids, but they produce them at different levels. To quickly discuss the differences between CBD and THC, I must preface that I am not in any way a medical professional or giving medical advice or prescription information at this point. However, I understand CBD to be used more in medical treatment such as pain management, ongoing anxiety, and in some cases has helped individuals with epilepsy. I wish I knew how it all worked and I could answer those questions, but I don't. So if you have questions that you would like answered, please go seek the assistance of a medical professional. However, what I can tell you is that CBD will not generate any psychoactive or psychotropic effects such as a buzz or a high or a feeling of intoxication or euphoria. CBD is simply taken and, from my understanding, can help in those ailments over time, but you won't feel anything immediately after taking it. So we briefly touched upon CBD, but now we're going to jump over to THC because I think that's the key to answering a lot of these questions. And to go there, we have to first remember that we have the cannabis species, and from there, we have two different plants, a hemp plant and a marijuana plant. The key to note is that THC is present in both of these plants. And ultimately, it's which plant is it coming from that dictates, is it legal? Is it illegal? How much should I be consuming? And how is it going to make me feel? THC, unlike CBD, will impact you. It's up for debate whether or not it's considered psychoactive or psychotropic, but ultimately, what you want to note is that it will impact your mental state and your cognitive function. So similar to alcohol, it's going to impact the way you think and or feel based on the nature of what it is. Now that we're talking about THC, let's answer one of the really big questions, which I know a lot of people have, and frankly, I had. And that's, how is it legal in some of these markets? So you have California and the state of Washington and Colorado, which I think many of us know are states that have legalized the use of marijuana for recreational purposes. So there's that. I live in Texas and I can still consume these THC products, and I know a lot of people are wondering how. And that is because the THC that is available on the market is coming from the hemp plant. So as we discussed earlier, there's THC in both of these plants. There's marijuana and there's hemp. Well, marijuana is illegal here in Texas, unlike some of these other states. However, hemp is not. So yes, you heard that correctly. THC from the hemp plant is legal not only in Texas, but many states across the United States because of the 2018 Farm Bill. So the 2018 Farm Bill legalized THC as long as A, it came from the hemp plant, and B, it was less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. Since the 2018 Farm Bill took effect, you started to notice more products hitting the market, such as gummies or vapes, or in some cases, beverages that contained Delta 8 or Delta 9 THC. Are you still hanging in there? I feel like the next portion of your program, now we're going to talk about the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9. We're in the family of THC, and there's like 20 different types of THC. And within that, you have a Delta 8 and you have a Delta 9. And you might ask where they got their name, and it's all scientific in nature, and it literally comes down to like where the double compound is on the molecular structure. So, I don't know, fun fact. However, I think the big things to note about Delta 8 and 9 is that even though they're both THC, they do impact and affect you differently. So I have heard others describe Delta 8 as being more like a body feeling and less in the head. However, Delta 9 is very much like in your head, and it is more traditional in terms of that high that you associate with recreational marijuana. And I think the absolute most important thing to note here is that Delta 9 delivers that same feeling no matter what plant it's coming from. So you can have Delta 9 from a hemp plant, and you can have Delta 9 from a marijuana plant. And even though they're coming from different plants, that form of THC is still going to deliver that same feeling. One quick note that I absolutely have to say is that at the end of the day, everybody's experience of these materials or ingredients is going to be different. And we'll talk in a later episode about our own endocannabinoid system. But what I can tell you is that all of these ingredients impact us each so uniquely. It's like a thumbprint, and not any one of them is the same in terms of what we're experiencing and how it impacts us personally. It's like our own little DNA kit with each of these own little DNA kits mixing. Unlike, I think, when people associate beer or alcohol, it's like, this is the ABV and this is what it does. It's not like that. This is so much more complicated, but in the best and coolest way. So therefore, I say that because anything I've said up to this point is merely a description that I've heard from others or I've experienced myself. And I can't, at the end of the day, know how you're going to respond. And on that same note is why I always encourage people to start small. Again, we'll talk about that down the road, but I cannot emphasize enough how everybody should start very small in anything that they are going to be experimenting with. I want to share one more difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9, and not so much focused on how it makes you feel or what it does to you, but rather just kind of the general nature of it. And that is that there is more Delta 9 present in the cannabis plants than there is Delta 8. So they're both THC and they will make you feel different, but there is more Delta 9 in the plants. And so I kind of use the orange analogy of if I was to be making a glass of orange juice and I was squeezing out Delta 9, I'm going to just extract more juice than Delta 8. I share that with you simply so you have the information. So when you go into the market or a store and you see these products available, you know that it could be more likely that Delta 9 is derived from more natural ingredients, whereas Delta 8 could potentially, and not necessarily, be more mass produced or recreated or manufactured to derive more Delta 8 for that product. And I think ultimately you're going to create your own personal preferences based on how it makes you feel. I hope you learned something new today, or perhaps you learned something that you already knew, but in a different manner. So we didn't even really get to scratch the surface of all the other stuff I would love to talk about. So I encourage you to stay tuned to future episodes where we can go into more about our endocannabinoid system and discuss more about how these products are delivered, whether it's in the form of a vape or a gummy or a beverage, and how that can impact you. So again, thanks for listening to The Enlightened Buzz, and I appreciate your support.